Okay. Hi, my name is Anne Marie. I'm a UX designer in the DC area, and today I'm going to be talking about how I got started in this field. The long and short of it was I am a career shifter, so I was working in an unrelated field, and I decided that I did want to get into UX design because it's a high growth field, good earning potential, work from home, flexibility, but I decided to do a boot camp part-time while I continued working in my old role as a market researcher. And after I completed that boot camp, I had to send out a ton of applications. I had to network a ton, and it was a lucky break as well as this company that was willing to take a chance on me as someone without a ton of experience in this field. So that, again, that's the long and short of it. So backing up to even deciding if I wanted to get into this field, I first decided to research, what are the median salaries? What is the starting salary? I also did a lot of informational interviews, talking to people to learn about what their day-to-day was like. What are some of the important skills to have if you want to pursue this field? So that was my first step in first deciding. So I reached out to friends that I knew were working in this field, friends of friends, people that worked in tech, a lot of sort of cold outreach. And this community is great because a lot of people want to mentor and want to provide that to up-and-coming designers. So I got good responses back, and I was talking to people, and that sort of started me on this journey. Because at the time, I was trying to decide if even I wanted to pursue design or if I was more interested in doing becoming a Scrum Master and getting good at Agile, or going more down a data analytics path and doing some sort of certification for that. So in talking to people, really solidifying that interest, learning about how there are so many different niches within design that you can get into and specialize, it really piqued my interest. It really felt like a good industry to be in, so I decided to go ahead forward. So then I had to decide if I was going to do a boot camp or self-study, or some combination of the two, or get a master's. Personally, for me, I did not want to go down the path of getting a master's because I already had a master's, and those programs are usually about a year, which is fine, but you can't always work during them. Well, there are different programs, so I don't want to discourage anyone from getting a master's, but it didn't seem like a good fit for me. Additionally, at this point, because the field is still relatively new, you don't necessarily have to have a master's in order to be taken seriously. So you can acquire these skills in more non-formal mediums and still come out, as a potential candidate for various positions. So master's kind of was out as a serious option for me. So then I was between self-study or doing a boot camp. So the people that I had spoken to, actually several of them had done boot camps. So they were really helpful in informing my choice of which boot camp to do, because there are also a ton of different boot camps that you can choose from, specifically in UX design. So I knew that for myself, I needed something that I could do part-time while working, because I made this career transition back at the beginning of the pandemic. So I did not feel comfortable quitting my job, as there were record high layoffs and people leaving the workforce. And it was a really uncertain time. So I knew that I needed a boot camp that I could do part-time, evenings and weekends. I also was really adamant that any program that I did needed to have a tuition refund guarantee, so that if I just spent a bunch of money doing this boot camp and dedicated X amount of months or years to this career transition and it didn't pan out, that I at least would be able to get my money back. That was really important to me. The third big piece for me when choosing a boot camp was that I wanted to have one-on-one mentorship time. And that has proven to be invaluable because I still talk to my mentor. I think we have like a good relationship. He's been like such a positive influence in my career that has just been completely invaluable. Additionally, I also needed it to be remote because a lot of the programs you had to go in person, but also during the pandemic, a lot of programs were suspending their in-person classes anyways, because everything is remote now. So crazy to think about. So when it came to deciding between doing a boot camp or trying to do a self-study, you just have to know yourself. If you are motivated, disciplined enough to essentially create your own curriculum, stick to that curriculum, and then once you're done with that curriculum, then be creating a portfolio and applying to jobs. And frankly, that whole scenario felt extremely daunting, especially even so, I already felt that I had a good handle on a lot of design basics because, I had done reading, and actually in college, I had taken a class on design thinking, which is central to UX design. So, it is possible. And if you are working in a field that works with designers, like maybe if you're a software developer or something and you've worked with UX designers, you can do a self-study because you've had that exposure in the past. Or even if you're like a product manager or like a project lead and you've worked with designers, I think that's a lot more of a plausible way of doing a self-study than if you're just completely new to the industry trying to, again, make up your own curriculum in order to completely career transition. It's possible, but for myself, I thought that was going to be way too much for me to bite off. And that's literally why boot camps exist, because they have the curriculum set out for you. They also have career support after you finish that curriculum, and you have mentors along the way to help you when you have questions. And without that support infrastructure, I just felt like I was going to get too lost and not be able to finish. So that was how I came to that decision. Let me check my notes, see what else I want to touch on today. So once I decided that I wanted to do a boot camp, I mentioned my criteria that I had to have, and then I just chose one. And it was completely remote. I was completely siloed away, doing my work, meeting with my mentor once a week, and doing any sort of career development sort of in step with the design curriculum. It worked. My boot camp worked because I'm working in this field and I like my job and I'm so grateful that I did it. But honestly, my boot camp experience, I would say I was less than impressed overall. As I've mentioned, I had done a ton of research just to even, ask myself if I wanted to be working in this industry. So I felt like I had already read several books on design, like the Bible is like the design of everyday things, like Don't Make Me Think, Sprint. So I felt like I already had a pretty good handle on a lot of the basics, at least in theory, and the materials that my bootcamp provided. Again, I felt like I knew a lot of it, or it was really elementary, and I was not impressed in the way that it was presented as well. It was like blocks of paragraphs that you just read. It wasn't like that interactive. And I don't know if that's just because the world was trying to transition to entirely remote. And if I had gone in person to a class, it would have felt very different. But overall, I just was really unimpressed with the materials with my boot camp. When it came time for me to design my portfolio, I spent hours and hours and hours beyond what the program required, because otherwise my portfolio would have just been garbage, frankly, to do. You have to be prepared to work beyond what the bootcamp is telling you need to do to be successful. The saving grace for this program, again, was my mentor. I actually had a mentor that I was assigned and I had a couple sessions with, and I didn't feel like I was getting enough out of her mentorship. I think she ultimately requested, because I had like a scheduling conflict because my old job required during our busy season for extended hours for us to be online, so I wasn't going to be able to meet with her. So I think actually she requested that I be paired with someone else. And that was such a blessing, honestly, because then, like I mentioned, my new mentor was great. Like, he was so much more responsive. I could tell that he actually cared about his students, made himself, again, so available, and he's great. And a great contact for me to have in the industry. And one day I hope that I can provide that value back to him. And then the other saving grace of the program was the career portion after you complete the curriculum. So the way the program worked was like 8 months of me doing it part-time. And then after you got to that 8 months, then the career portion kicked in. So I had an amazing career mentor. Any questions with, salary negotiation, to getting interviews, to how to put together materials. He would host these sessions where we would talk about, all of the questions and issues that we had been running into during our application process. And again, he just was like such a saving grace for this program, and almost he made it worthwhile to do the entire program. So I'm very grateful that I had him as such a helpful mentor. Okay, so interviewing. So after I did all the work of the boot camp, I had some sort of a portfolio. I've been sending out applications. I realized that it wasn't going to be enough to make me stand out and to actually get a full-time position in the industry. So I knew that I had to do supplementary work. So basically, anytime there was an Adobe competition, Adobe will occasionally do these design competitions. I signed up for it. I either did it by myself or I did it with a partner who also had just graduated the program. And we would work through whatever the design prompt was, creating like a short prototype for an application, and submit it. And we never won anything. Honestly, they weren't that great, but it was great because it gave me experience to work with another designer. Because again, during the boot camp, I was completely siloed and just reading these blocks of text and trying to do the curriculum, and then occasionally talking to my mentor, but not having that collaborative aspect. So that was really good for me, again, to get more experience with another designer. That also was a talking point for me in interviews about how I really was taking my career transition seriously, about doing these extra projects as well. In addition to any design challenges that I could do, I also joined an organization called Code for Philly, and that was really cool because that did give me some experience working with other people that had different skill sets. So there was a developer in that group, and there was like a data guy, and then there were other designers that were trying to get experience. And the project idea was from the data guy who wanted to create an application to help people, specifically Pennsylvania natives, learn about what sort of plants would do best in their specific gardens. So we had to pull in a bunch of data from, I think it was like the National Park Service, or it was like a free online data source, and put it into like a really nice application form where people could filter through. We had like a little quiz that people could take about what it was like in their garden or what their goals were. And that's actually live today. So I don't know, it was a cool little project. And again, that was a great talking point for working with other designers, working with a developer, working with someone who was kind of functioning as like a project manager. So I would highly recommend getting involved with an organization like Code for Philly if you need real project experience. Another thing that I did for supplementary work was I started writing Medium articles. Whenever there was like a hot topic in tech that I thought was important to have like a design take on, I would write up a little article about that. And that was great because there are always fields where you can link your portfolio and any like additional sites to your work. And that was always where I would link. I would link my portfolio and I would link my Medium writing so they could see I was a good writer as well. Was that everything that I did? And now getting into the career search. So as I mentioned in the beginning, the long and short of it is just, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of grit. Like you have to be dedicating a lot of hours to this every week and making it a priority because, at least for me, I knew it wasn't going to happen because I didn't have a lot of contacts in this industry. I wasn't working like UX design adjacent. So again, completely new. And it's just a matter of like getting good at it, like really sinking your teeth into like doing the hours, putting in the hours to get more familiar with your craft and the industry. And then also, a little luck. Like I did a ton of networking because again, this was like in the age of COVID, like when COVID was very fresh, everything was online. So I attended so many virtual meetups that I found through Meetup. And afterwards, I would message people on LinkedIn to see if I could have an informational interview or answer any questions that I had about their specific role in their company that maybe I found their story specifically was interesting. Reaching out to my existing network, friends of friends that I saw, again, worked in the industry, and asking if they would feel comfortable referring me, and just having to get more comfortable with being bold about my asks of people. And the worst they can say is no. So my break finally came when a personal friend of mine said that they knew a friend that worked at a company that had a design department. And it was it was like a third connection that I was able to speak to a woman who worked in the department that I work in now. And it took me 3 times to apply to this company before I got an offer. So the first time I spoke to this woman that is at the company that I work at and in the department, I was in the middle of my boot camp. So I was trying to start early in networking, and I was asking her questions and I was telling her my background and what I was trying to do. And then she actually invited me to apply, but I was just too new. Like I barely had a portfolio at that point, and I didn't get anywhere with that application. I applied a second time after I had finished the program through a referral from her again, I believe. And this time I got a lot further in the interview process. I think I had gotten through the second round, and they liked me, and I was feeling good, and I was really like vibing with the hiring manager that I was working with, as well as the members of the team that I had started to interview with. And but then I got a call that they didn't need any more designers, essentially, that they were kind of going on a hiring freeze, and that they were not going to continue along with my application process. But then a couple months later, they actually called me back and said, hey, that hiring freeze is actually no longer, and we would like to continue along with you as a candidate. And then I was like, okay, sure, of course, great. And then finally I finished out the interview process, and then I had an offer at the end of that. So of course, during that whole time, I was putting out probably, 10 applications a week, still doing all of this supplementary work, still attending meetups and networking and casting my net as wide as humanly possible, until I had, an offer that I was happy with. So yeah, it was a lot of work. It is possible. Other people have had a much easier time of getting hired, especially if they were already working, like I mentioned, in similar industries. But myself, coming from market research or something that really was not related to design, I had to get a little more creative about selling my skill set. And maybe that's something that I'll get into at a later time. But yeah, so that is my experience. I hope this was helpful to anyone who is also looking to get into the industry. And my biggest piece of advice is to just be really proactive in all of the areas that you know you should be proactive. Be really honest with yourself about where your skills are and where you need to improve. And then also, I would say get comfortable with the idea of potentially doing part-time work, part-time design work, doing contract work, before you get a full-time salaried position offer somewhere. Because that was a very real conversation that I had to have with myself, because I was so unhappy in my prior position. I was like, okay, Anne-Marie, like, you have to be prepared to just do contract work that could potentially turn into a long-term position, doing freelance work, doing side work, and go from there. Again, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them and I will do my best to answer. And good luck out there.